Greetings, friends, and welcome back to another episode of Erudite Magic. A few weeks ago, we talked about Joshua Jay's Talk About Tricks, which is a massive collection from the pages of Magic magazine. Last week, we talked about The Jinx, which was the periodical put out by none other than Ted Anneman in the 1930s and the 1940s. But what we're about to talk about today is a mammoth collection of magic spanning 20 years of creativity across a huge spectrum of creators. Well over half of my repertoire came from these books back in the day, and I still cherish them as part of a classic collection of close-up magic. Say that 5 times fast. Classic collection of close-up magic. 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 I am, of course, referring to none other than Harry Lorayne's Apocalypse, a magic magazine that ran from 1978 all the way to 1997. Let's take a little trip down memory lane and introduce you to this fantastic resource of close-up magic. Everyone who was anyone in the magic world in the late 70s through the 90s contributed to this magazine. And a lot of the items that were published in Apocalypse ended up in a collection of that creator's work at some point down the line. I'm talking about luminaries such as David Roth, Jeff Latta, Derek Dingle, John Cornelius, Eddie Fector, Paul Harris, Larry Jennings, Ken Krenzel, Stephen Minch, Jonathan Townsend, Tony Slidini, Darwin Ortiz, Carol Fox, Richard Vollmer, Jamie Ian Swiss, Ben Harris, Max Maven, Di Vernon, Ed Marlowe, Tom Mullica, Brother John Hammond, Saul Stone, Paul Gertner, Herb Zero, Juan Tamariz, J.K. Hartman, Gaetan Bloom, David Regal, John Carney, Mary Edid, Bob Kohler, Dean Dill, Aaron Fisher, Simon Lovell, Lee Asher, Michael Amar, Larry Becker, Patrick Page, Jeff McBride, The Amazing Randy, and of course, Harry Lorayne. I assure you, even with a list of names that long, I left somebody out and I'm going to offend somebody because there were just that many contributors to this magazine. As you can imagine with a list like the one I just gave, the material is super diverse. Yes, probably half the tricks are card related, but the other half of this collection is quite diverse. You already heard me mention some of the coin legends like David Roth, Jeff Latta, Saul Stone, and some of their best creations were taught in Apocalypse first. For example, in the very first episode of the magazine, David Roth taught his classic chink-a-chink routine, which he performed on The Late Show with David Letterman.
Player like that, but if I flutter my fingers, one coin travels over to here.
An incredible piece of magic and not that difficult to do. But beyond cards and coins, there are items with rings, ropes, mental bowling. No, really, this was contributed by Phil Goldstein, later known as Max Maven, as the cover item of issue 4, April 1978. Keys, dice, numbers, rings, bills, silks, sponge balls, watches, business cards, rubber bands, paper clips, bottles, pins, mentalism, etc. Let's talk for a second about the sponsor of this week's video, Don's Magic and Books. Don is a small business owner out of Minnesota who loves to put magic books into your hands. I checked before this episode and I didn't see any Apocalypse volumes on his website, but that doesn't mean that you shouldn't look for them because periodically Don gets in a lot of books that have been out of print, one of a kind. There aren't many copies of them, and when he gets them, he offers them up at such great prices, they usually don't last long. So I highly recommend that you check his site early and often, and if you're very interested in a specific book, email him to see if he can alert you when he gets a copy in. This week, Don is offering 10% off of most items on the website via the code MAGAZINE. If you apply that code at checkout, you'll not only get 10% off, you'll let Don know that you're an ardent supporter of Erudite Magic. I love hearing about the deals that you guys are getting, so sound off down below with one of your favorite purchases from Don's Magic and Books. Don't forget to check out his website, which will be linked in the description below, and start saving this week with code MAGAZINE. Back to the discussion of Apocalypse. The whole magazine is primarily focused around close-up magic, although like anything close-up, it can actually be expanded to play for a larger audience. And if that's something that interests you, you should check out John Graham's book, Stage by Stage, which I reviewed here. In addition to all of the tricks that are here in Apocalypse, you can't usually do tricks without knowing sleights, and there are dozens and dozens and dozens of sleights that are taught here, all the way from the most basic items like a double lift to far more advanced moves. Harry Lorayne has always had a way with words in his writing style, and it's very conversational, so you'll feel like when you're reading the write-ups that you're getting in-person instruction. But let me tell you a little story about how I came into Apocalypse and how it helped to stretch and build me into the magician that I am today. You see, I actually lucked into the Apocalypse. And yes, I specifically said lucked into. I had a friend who bought the first volume of the bound Apocalypse, which contains years 1 through 5, on eBay. I had just gotten back into magic after college, and he was excited to share some of what he just got. However, after he received the book, he told me that he thought it might be a little too advanced for him, and he wasn't sure that he was going to make the best use of it, so he actually gifted me the book. The Apocalypse wasn't even on my radar at the time, so obviously with the size of this thing, I dove right into it, expecting that I would learn a lot from it. However, as I began to read the book, I quickly came to the realization that it might have been a little too advanced for me as well. Or at least that was my initial conclusion. Fast forward about 6 months after getting back into magic, I had read more books and was starting to practice more magic, and I was beginning to understand the jargon that goes with any hobby or specialization that you're building. And something piqued my interest, something I had seen online, a trick that was listed in Apocalypse, and I went back and started to read it. Only now I was prepared to understand what it was saying. It was as if the blinders had been lifted, or I got reading glasses, or whatever analogy you'd like to use. I was now able to understand the Apocalypse without thinking that it was too advanced for what I was capable of. Once I had some basic terminology under my belt, this set of books turned into a gold mine of material for me. I started soaking it up regularly, learning, growing, and performing. This is not a collection of pipe dreams. This is real-world working magic. As great as these books are, I want to tell you a little bit about a controversy surrounding them. The Apocalypse idea was originally the brainchild of Richard Kaufman, who approached Harry Lorayne as a young man with a dream of putting out a great magic magazine. Harry and Richard struck up a partnership and started in on this journey to produce the next great magic magazine. For many reasons, after the first year, Richard decided that he no longer wished to participate in this venture. So Harry took over, but this was not without controversy. Richard and Harry, once partners in the first year of Apocalypse, turned into adversaries, with Richard starting his own new magazine called Richard's Almanac. There were vitriolic letters sent back and forth, with people taking sides. I'm happy to report that the two of them are back to having a cordial relationship, but if you want to read more, you can certainly find half of the story here in Apocalypse, and you can find some of the other information either online or in Richard's Almanac. What isn't controversial, however, is that this is one of the best collections of close-up magic for over 2 decades. Let's talk for a second about cost and how you can go about getting these treasures. Back towards the beginning, each episode was about $2.50. So a full year would have cost you about $30 in 1978's money. Each of the bound books has 5 years worth of issues in it, but these are sadly out of print. I was lucky enough to procure all 4 bound versions of the books before they were completely out of print. At this point, it's pretty rare to see one of these books outside the used market. So why have I told you all this exciting things about these books if you can't get them? Well, you can, but just not in physical form unless you're willing to go on a treasure hunt. If you're okay with ebooks or PDFs, the Conjuring Arts Research Center has acquired the rights to publish these as PDFs. And they've made each year available for a little less than $15. And of course, if you wanted to buy all 20 years at once, it would cost you about $300. Yes, these are absolutely not cheap, but my recommendation is if you want to know if you're interested in this material, you should start off with buying 1 year for $15. That's a relatively low investment threshold, and that way you can decide if this is the type of material you could see yourself using. I've seen people post questions about the usability of this material, but with the caliber of creators who contributed items, as well as the fact that it ran for 20 years, that ought to tell you something about the quality of the magic that was in it. Trust me when I tell you, I guarantee you'll find something to perform within the pages of this magazine. And I would love to hear from you. What are some of your favorite items from the Apocalypse that you still perform or have performed at some point? Drop it down in the comments below. We want to hear from you. In addition to the tricks and sleights, there's also gossip and news articles, variations on a theme to older tricks, and like any magazine, it reads like a history of magic for the period that it covers. You'll start to find out who some of the key movers and shakers were at the time, the types of magic that the community was interested in. It's always fascinating to me to see what things were popular. For example, when I was in college, the torn and restored piece by piece card, that was all the rage, and nowadays I don't really know anyone who performs it anymore. Anyway, the bottom line is that it's up to you. You can either take it slow and build on it piece by piece by piece over time, or if you just have to have it all, you can get it all at once over at the Conjuring Arts Research Center. As always, my friends, I appreciate you watching, and until next time, keep reading.